I love this book. This is the PTSD Workbook by Mary Beth Williams and Soili Poijula. I apologize if I got that name wrong. It's a 384-page, which maybe sounds intimidating, but it's really not that bad, workbook on everything PTSD. So it helps you to understand PTSD, understand if you have it or not, go through some questions to get a better understanding of yourself, and hopefully put you on the path towards healing from PTSD. That's what it did for me. So I'm going to be reviewing the second edition because that is what I had bought at the time. I had been using this book a couple of years ago. But the third edition, it seems like what they did was they took some later chapters that were focused on CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and they condensed them down into the other chapters, and they added 2 chapters in the middle, which maybe encompassed a little bit of what were in those chapters. Personally, when I went through this workbook, I found that it had everything that I could ever need to know about PTSD and healing from PTSD, and I just want to read over what the chapters are in this current edition, the third edition that's out, so you have an idea of what's inside. So we've got the introduction, a look at trauma is chapter 1, chapter 2, before doing the work, safety, security, and intention, chapter 3, identifying and writing about what has happened to you, chapter 4, helping yourself when you re-experience a trauma, chapter 5, coping with trauma with less avoidance, chapter 6, dealing with category D symptoms part 1, chapter 7, the same thing part 2, chapter 8, lessening arousal, what to do if you can't sleep, can't relax, or are angry and irritable, chapter 9, stress, trauma, and the body, chapter 10, for veterans returning from war, tools for personal survival, chapter 11, finding meaning, Chapter 12, Final Thoughts and Exercises. Now, the book is written by 2 women with PhDs, and they do put references throughout the book. It's based in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, so it's not like they're just pulling stuff out of the air. They know what they're talking about, and believe me, it worked for me. If this already sounds like something you're interested in, I do have it up on my Amazon shop. I'm going to put a link to that down below. Go ahead and check it out. So I want to give you a little backstory of how I came upon the book and how it helped me, so maybe you can get a better understanding if it's a right fit for you. I came across this book 3 years ago when my ex had been breaking up with me, and a lot of questions arose and I was having a hard time with it. And we were in couples therapy, and a couples therapist had mentioned trauma, and I don't know why I never thought of this before, probably because it just had never really been mentioned to me before. But once she said that, it took a little while to wiggle its way into my head, but eventually I was like, wait a minute, this makes total sense as to why we're having problems and why I have the problems that I do, probably why he has the problems that he does, and so I wanted to explore it more. Now, the way that things were working in therapy, he was not really engaging in therapy. He didn't want to be there so much, and so we focused on me, and we got me to a individual therapist for a little bit. It was only 5 sessions, but we focused in on trauma and PTSD. And what I did learn with that therapist was wonderful and valuable, but I only spent 5 sessions with her, so how much could she really do with me? So I'm a proactive person. I like to take things into my own hands, and I went out and I found a bunch of books, this workbook being one of them, and I think really this was the one that really helped me the most and changed my life. And I say that because all the other books that I read were wonderful, and I'll probably do reviews on those as well, but this one is a workbook, and this one actually tells you what to do and gives you ideas of what to do, and it doesn't force you to do anything specific, because there were exercises in here that I was like, I don't need this. This is not my thing. But then there were other ones where I was like, yes, this is exactly what I need. Tell me how to do it. So I have had experiences with trauma throughout my whole life. You know, in my childhood, there was a lot of trauma going on, physical stuff, emotional stuff. And I also experienced it in adolescence. I experienced it in adulthood, from different sources of trauma. So I've experienced the complex PTSD, as people call it. I've experienced just plain old PTSD, which, you know, single event. You could think of them as single event PTSD and multiple event PTSD, or prolonged. Either way, I experienced all of it, so I needed something like this to really guide me through and to understand and comprehend everything that I went through. And during the breakup, a lot of these triggers and these things that had happened to me, they started flashing back. I started having nightmares. I started dissociating. I started having trouble focusing, which I was already having trouble focusing. I just didn't have a word for it. I didn't know what dissociation was. Things like this helped me learn. Since I was in the middle of a breakup, I was like all over the place. Emotionally, I was a total wreck. wreck. I couldn't do things. I was afraid to drive. I was afraid to be around people. I was afraid to speak and express myself because I didn't know if I was going to make the wrong move and make myself unsafe. Which actually leads me into the first thing that I really love about this book is that right away they get you into safety and explaining what safety is and exploring what safety is for you and how you can help to make yourself feel safe. They start the book this way so that you don't go through the rest of the book and do something that's too much for you. You know, one of the reasons why it's always recommended that you go in to see a therapist is a therapist can guide you and a therapist can watch you and pay attention and notice when things are a little too heavy and a little bit too much for you. And actually that therapist that I saw pointed something out to me which I didn't even realize. She had shown me like, oh, it seems like we went a little too far last time. It was a little too much. And on my own, I would have never seen that. But her pointing it out helped me to understand and helped me to figure things out. Now, the book helps you understand safety and helps you understand when you're going too far by going through a whole chapter on safety and giving you ways to bring yourself back to safety, but also explaining something called standard units of distress. Now, again, this was in my second edition. I don't know if they explain it the same way in the third edition. I'm going to assume they probably do. But this is just like a basic thing you've probably heard of before, where you rate how you're feeling on a scale from either 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. 10 being like a high arousal, high frustration, anger, scared, like over intense amounts of stress to the point where like you can't do anything. And they give you examples for each number, but you know, you get to decide what it feels like for you. I personally found this exercise really helpful because shortly after reading it, I went out to do something with a friend. We were driving. Driving was an issue I was having problems with. And I was able to communicate to the friend, like, well, I had told the friend about this whole idea of the standard units of distress. And I said, you know, I'm at about a 7 right now. And it kind of helped me help her to understand, like, I'm having a hard time with this. I'm still able to function. I'm still able to do it. But just please, like, give me a little slack here while I drive. And that's just one example of so many things that this book did to help me get back in touch with how do I feel about myself and my emotions and my body and what's going on around me. How do I cope with these things? I can't even tell you how much is in this book. I went and flipped through it just before I sat down to do this, and there was all these things and all these chapters and stuff that I forgot were even in there. I can't believe it. I really can't believe how much is in there. Like anything you would ever need to know about how to heal from PTSD, at least in my opinion, it's in there. And as I said, like, I think it's great that there's so much in there because you can skip things over if they're not for you. If you don't need them, you don't need them. That's okay. You know, there's that whole chapter on veterans. Not all of us went to war who have PTSD or PTSD symptoms. That's okay. And I should mention here, I should have mentioned it in the beginning, even if you are not sure if you have PTSD, if you're just showing some symptoms, I think you can still benefit from this book. There is a section where they kind of help you to understand whether you might have it or not. You always want to, of course, go to a therapist or a professional that can help to diagnose you with it. But even if you're not really sure, or you just want to figure it out at home, I think it's still got a lot helpful for anybody, really. Anybody who struggles with some difficult situation that they've gone through in their lives that was really stressful. Okay, so how does this book actually help you get through PTSD? There's a ton of exercises. A lot of them are thinking things through. Again, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. So those who don't know what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy, the basic idea is that your thoughts and your emotions and your behavior, they're all linked together and they all influence each other. And if you can put some space between them and get in there and start to have control over some of them, then you can change the outcomes. You can change your behavior. You can change the way that you feel your emotions. You can change the way that you think. And that ability to get in there and change things gives you more control over your life and helps you to feel safer and better able to cope with the world. So one thing that I love that the book does, because it's really easy to do, I found it really easy to do anyway, is they give you like lots and lots of statements in the chapters. And it's not like the whole book is full of this. There is explanations and there's giving you understanding and exercises other than this, but I loved that there's just like a lot of statements for you to reflect on, and they're things that you can answer really quickly. So I wrote a few down that I really liked here these helped me a lot. One of them was, I ask for help from the wrong people. You know, seems like a simple thing. Do I ask for help from the wrong people? But if you really reflect on it and reflect on the people who you ask for help from, Are they the right people? Do you know? And you don't have to have a right answer, but just thinking about it can help you think about the way that you deal with things. I should mention that I took notes. I took the Kindle version of this, and I think you're probably better off getting a hard copy. This is why I don't have something to show you. So I had a digital copy of the book, but I think you're probably better off getting I believe it's a soft cover book or a spiral bound. I'm not really sure. Probably soft cover. You can check it out on Amazon. Because I think it's easier to actually write things down and check things off in the book. They do give you space to do that. I did the Kindle, and so I highlighted and I put notes, and it was a little bit more difficult for me to do that. So that's something to consider if you're going to purchase this. One of the statements was, having people supposed to protect me show little regard for me. I had to sit and think about that one, especially because I was in the middle of a breakup, and I was like, well, is my ex who was my partner at the time, is he supposed to protect me? And what about other people in my life who were supposed to protect me? And did those people show little regard for me? I really had to sit and think about it. And these are important questions to ask yourself. Another one was, I have a message to give that I can't say directly. That was another one that kind of hit me a little bit. I'm like, there are things that I don't directly say to people. And why don't I say them directly to people? Or what is that message? What's inside of me that I can't get out? These things are important. So there's things like that to me, they're pretty simple. I mean, sometimes those things are hard to go through, don't get me wrong. And they tell you in the book. That's why they start the book with the chapter on safety. If something's too hard or too it gets you too hard and gets you too excited or uncomfortable or whatever, you'll know, because that chapter helps you to understand when something's triggering you, when it's getting too much for you to handle, and then you'll know, and you'll be able to go back to the things from that chapter to calm yourself down, maybe walk away from the book and come back at a better time. But besides things like those statements, which also a lot of those statements, it's not a yes or no, they give you a scale 0 to 5 or something, or 1 to 5, and you kind of rate yourself. Again, it's just to get you thinking. There's also a lot of questions, and I really like the questions, and I wrote down a few of those that I liked. One of those questions was, what makes you feel safe physically when you are alone with others and in different situations? That's not something I ever considered, I think, before I had this book. What is it that makes me feel safe? And it seems like such an obvious thing when it comes to PTSD, because trauma makes you feel not safe, but I never really considered it before, and that was super important to help me heal. Another one, and this actually came from that chapter that helps you to learn about feeling safe, was, if you could create a safe place in your present physical reality, and if money and time were no consideration, where would your safe place be? And I took that to mean, what would it look like? How would you describe it? And so I sat there and I wrote out the perfect place for me to feel safe. And just even doing that kind of calmed me down and helped me to feel better. Another question from a later chapter was, if your body or a body part could speak about how it was treated during the trauma or traumas, what would it say? That was one of those ones. I guess it's just the way that it's phrased that I was like, wow, okay. I think if somebody asks you, what would you say about your trauma? There's something that you would say, but I think making it your body part, what would your body part say, helped me get outside of myself a little bit and be like, oh, okay, so maybe I would say this, but if my arm was speaking, or my stomach was speaking, or my leg was speaking, it might say something very different. So there are a ton of these statements and questions throughout the whole book, and I love that they're there because it is a workbook and doing the work. And I will always say this to people, you can't just read things and think that you're just going to get better by reading. You have to work. So I love that this is a workbook because it gives you the exercises and it helps you at your own pace go through and figure things out. And it helped me immensely. But one of the exercises that I actually found incredibly helpful, and it seems so basic, and they introduce it early on and they even tell you not to get too deep into it, but it helped me a lot, was to just list out your traumas. Not going into detail, not going into the whole thing and getting yourself all worked up and upset, but just make a list. Just so it's out of your body, out of your mind, out of your system, and it's external. It's on a piece of paper and you can kind of just look at it from a little bit of distance. That helped me so much because I don't think I realized how much I actually went through in my life, and seeing it written out on paper helped me to understand, like, that's why I'm here with this workbook in front of me. That's why I've had so much difficulty in this relationship that we were in the middle of a breakup. Like, that's how I got here. And I think that was really helpful. I needed to do that. Now, truly, I don't think I really did this book justice going over it like this. I think you'll really get the full experience if you just get it and start doing the exercises. It's really powerful. It helped me so much. I hope I'm conveying that here. And if you do want to get it, if you decide you want to get it, I have an Amazon shop. It has that book along with other books that helped me to deal with PTSD, some other mental health books, some mental health gifts I just updated because the holidays are coming. Maybe you want to get something for somebody else. Go ahead and check that out. I'll put the link below. And if you decide you want to get it, let me know down below. I'd love to hear about it. Maybe you've done this book yourself. What do you think about the book? Leave that down below in the comments. Let's hear about it.